A party, ahead, wine, and what was hidden was greater. The dream of motherhood turns into a nightmare, and doubt extends to both kin and stranger. The coldness that lasted for years ends with a fiery episode that burns hearts, and the mystery will be solved when the conscience awakens. To solve the mystery, let's begin the investigation. Good evening, and welcome to a new story in today's case. We'll ride the time machine back to the year in Niles, Michigan, a small town on the northern border of Indiana. There lived the hero of our story, or as they call her, Becky. Becky was 16 years old and lived with her mother Diana and her mother's friend Steve at that time. Diana worked a lot in factories, so she would leave Becky alone at home for long periods. However, she knew that Becky was somewhat independent and self-reliant, so she wasn't afraid to leave her alone for long periods. In the end, because she had to do so to provide a decent life for her and meet all her needs. Most of the time, Steve, Diana's friend, would be present at the house, so Becky would spend long periods with him. Diana had actually been involved with this Steve, and Becky was about 3 years old at the time. He didn't live with them initially. He visited them a lot and stayed with them at the house for long periods, but he moved to live with them recently. Since Becky entered adolescence, like a father to Becky or compensating her for the loss of her father, their relationship was initially good. But then, from the information I gathered, I found that Becky recently started getting into many conflicts with Steve, and he was a bit harsh in dealing with her, maybe because she was in adolescence. Her mind was changing at that time, and her ideas were changing, so he had to be strict in dealing with her. It's important that Becky's relationship with Steve and her mother Diana wasn't the best thing in the recent period to the extent that they once got into a conflict. Becky told them, "You know that I will be relieved from all this and the problems you cause me when I leave the house and go. I'm done. I won't stay here anymore. I'll go live with my friend, and I'll do whatever I want, whether you like it or not." Indeed, Becky packed her things and went to her friend Jacqueline's house. Becky and Jacqueline were friends for a long time, not recently acquainted, but their relationship was good. Becky went to her friend Jacqueline's house to stay with her, but unfortunately, Jacqueline was supposed to travel for a few days with her boyfriend Todd. So she had to cancel the trip and not travel so as not to leave Becky alone in the house. But she would go spend some time, like a night out, with her boyfriend Todd before he traveled and left her. Jacqueline returned home the next day, and Todd came to drop her off with his car. But they were surprised when they didn't find Becky at home. It was clear that she had just left the house a short while ago because she left the music playing and the TV on, but she wasn't there. Jacqueline found the situation a bit strange. How could Becky just walk away like that without telling her, leaving the music playing, the TV on, and disappearing suddenly? But she found a note on the table written by Becky, telling her that she went to meet her friend Rob and would return soon. Her friend Rob's house was close to Jacqueline's, so she wasn't supposed to take long to go to him and come back. Rob's house was very close to Jacqueline's, to the extent that Becky was supposed to walk to his house, and she wasn't supposed to stay with him for a long time because Rob worked 2 jobs. He would meet her in the period between the 2 jobs because he didn't have any free time in his day. Up to here, everything was supposed to be normal, at least for Jacqueline. But Jacqueline discovered that nothing was normal when Rob called her and asked about Becky. Jacqueline was shocked and said to him, "How come she's not supposed to be with you right now?" He said that she was indeed supposed to be with him right now, but she was late. So he called to ask about her and see why she was delayed. This raised a lot of suspicion about Becky because Rob's house was very close, as I told you, to Jacqueline's. So she wasn't supposed to take all this time in that very short distance to reach him. Now Becky is not in Jacqueline's house and not in her friend Rob's house, leaving all her things at Jacqueline's, leaving her cigarettes, and leaving her wallet with her money. So Jacqueline was confused and didn't know how to act. She decided to call Diana, Becky's mother, and inform her. She called her and told her what happened, and they decided that it was okay and there was no need to worry, and they would go out and meet and look for her. Indeed, Diana met Jacqueline, and they went out to look for her. They looked for her in the streets and went to the places she used to go to her friends' houses, to their relatives' houses, but no one knew anything about her. After 8 hours of searching without any result, they reported her disappearance to the police. They were sure and told the police that it was impossible for her to have run away because, at the very least, if she were to run away, she would tell her older sister Sandy, who was her confidant. Where is Becky, and what exactly happened to her? Before we answer these questions, we need to know who Becky is. Becky Stowe, 16 years old, was a high school student and an exemplary student in many things. Her personality was cheerful, she loved to joke, and she always liked to make many friends. Her favorite color was green, and her life's dream was to have a green Jeep. Becky was very close to her family, to her mother Diana, and to her sister Sandy, who was older than her by 3 years. What I also learned is that Diana was very close to Becky to the extent that Becky could tell her anything. They were very open to each other. There were no secrets between them, as if she was her friend, not her mother. They always had common conversations, but when Becky reached adolescence, she started hiding many things from her mother. For example, if she had 5 secrets, she would tell her mother only 1 secret, meaning she would hide from her. But despite this, they were always together, and they spent most of the holidays together, going out and having fun. Becky had many friends and liked to make friendships. Of course, she had a boy she loved and admired, who was Rob, Jacqueline's boyfriend. They always went out together, stayed up late, and attended parties. Of course, these parties had alcohol and cigarettes, and Becky would do her duty and drink everything. She wouldn't say no to anything, despite being only 16 years old. As her sister San said, she was very excited about the idea of being with Rob, who was the handsome young man of her dreams. Rob was very popular in school and loved by all his friends, especially more loved by the girls. Up to here, her life was going normally and very well, at least for them. So where could she have gone, and what happened to her? Now the investigators have reached information about Becky, and among this information is a very important piece of information, which is that she was 16 years old and pregnant. She was suspicious of the matter and went with Jacqueline to buy a pregnancy test. She took the test, and indeed, she was pregnant, contrary to expectations. Becky was very excited and happy about this pregnancy and was happy that she would have a small child. Yet, Jacqueline said that as much as she was happy and pleased with this pregnancy, she was also anxious, tense, and afraid to tell her mother Diana. And as I told you, Diana and Becky talked to each other about everything and were very open to each other. So one day, Diana talked to Becky about the subject of birth control and that she shouldn't have children right now or have 1 or 2 children like that. So Becky asked her, "What do you think if I get pregnant soon?" Diana said to her, "Of course not. You must have an abortion." Here the police thought that Becky ran away for this reason, that she didn't want to tell her mother so as not to force her to abort the child. So they thought that she might have run away for this reason and that she would appear again after a sufficient period had passed so that it would be impossible to have an abortion to confront her mother with the fait accompli. Of course, her mother Diana was very upset that she didn't tell her about this matter, nor did she tell her sister Sandy. She said that she told her at that time, yes, she must have an abortion, but if she had confessed to her about this pregnancy, she would have been supportive of her regardless of her decision. Now, as I told you, the police were convinced that Becky had run away for fear of facing her mother and that she would go through a sufficient period of pregnancy and then reappear. But her family didn't see it that way at all and believed it was impossible for her to have run away for many reasons. First, she left her wallet, which contained dollars, and didn't take it with her. Second, she left her cigarettes behind. She didn't take them. Yes, she was pregnant and shouldn't smoke, but in the end, she was a child of 16 years old, meaning she wasn't responsible for her actions and didn't understand her situation. And Shirley, as you know, the father. So they went to Rob's house and knocked on the door. He told them that his mother wasn't there and that they couldn't interrogate him without his mother's presence because he was years 16 old and legally considered still a child in the eyes of the law. He told them either to leave or wait until his mother came and then interrogate him. So indeed, the investigators waited a while until his mother returned and began to interrogate him. When they confronted him with the issue of Becky's pregnancy, he kept crying and told them that yes, there was a relationship between them once only, and that it was a mistake, but he was wearing a contraceptive. His mother also started to defend him and told them that maybe Becky was in a relationship with someone else and that the pregnancy was from him, not from my son. My son is well-raised and from a good family. He wouldn't do such a thing. But when they asked Becky's friends, they all agreed that she told them that the child was Rob's, and they were also 100% sure that the child was Rob's. The investigators decided not to embarrass Rob's mother and said that maybe Becky was in a relationship with someone else. There was someone they suspected she might have been in a relationship with, and when they brought him in for interrogation, he told them that he already knew that the child was Rob's and that Becky herself had told him. When they followed up on the other person they suspected, he proved to be in another place, and it turned out that he was indeed innocent and had nothing to do with the matter and was removed from the circle of suspicion. After many investigations, the investigators found out that there was a relationship between Becky and Rob several times, not just once, but he lied to them and told them once only because he was afraid of confrontation and afraid that the police would accuse him of Becky's disappearance or her murder or anything. It turned out that Becky had a diary in which she wrote her very personal matters, and apparently, her friend was the one who found the diary and gave it to the police. When the investigators opened the diary, they found that she had recorded the days when there was a relationship between her and Rob in the diary. They went back to Rob and asked him if he knew that Becky was pregnant from him because we found in her diary that she had recorded that she told you she was pregnant. Here he broke down and told them that indeed, but he didn't want the pregnancy and told her to abort it, and that he was afraid that the child might not be his, and that he wasn't as serious about the relationship. I mean, Becky, yes, she loved him very much and was attached to him, and he was her first love, but for him, the matter was normal for him, and apparently, it was confirmed that Rob wasn't taking his relationship with Becky seriously, and that he neither took her out nor entertained her nor introduced her to his family and friends. He took the matter as if he saw himself as a good and exciting choice for Becky, and that he was involved with someone from the other side, the poor side. So he was, as you might say, dealing with the matter with superiority, seeing that he alone was enough for her without doing anything to impress her, for example. The important thing in the interrogation was that he said that he was supposed to meet Becky and see her on that day in the period between the two jobs, but he didn't see her, nor did she go to him, and he doesn't know anything about Becky until now and how and where they are and doesn't know any place she might be. When they started asking about his whereabouts and excuses for his absence, he told them that he was doing some work and walking in nature that morning, and then he was with his family in the afternoon, and then he went to his second job at night, where he worked as a bus driver. When they asked him about his relationship with Becky, he told them that for him, she was just a fling because he actually had another girlfriend who was closer and dearer to him, living in New York, similar to him in behavior and social status. So he saw that she was suitable for him, not Becky, and that Becky was just a fling. And of course, at that time, he was somewhat a famous football player, and his girlfriend from New York, he would take her and introduce her to his family and friends and entertain her and take her out, unlike Becky, whom he completely neglected. And here is a very strange paradox. Although he loved his girlfriend from New York, at the same time, he was cheating on her with Becky. In his meeting with the police, he was very calm and composed, not angry at all, and he answered all the questions, even when they took him to the police station to take a lie detector test and asked him about Becky's whereabouts. He told them that he didn't know, and he passed the test with a very high score. The investigators also followed him because he had a strong alibi, and he was supposed to be at work as he told them, and everything was normal. So they completely removed him from the circle of suspicion and started looking for a new suspect. The new suspect was Jacqueline's friend since Todd, Jacqueline's friend, and they went out together a lot, and Jacqueline went out with Becky a lot. So maybe the three of them, went out in gatherings, friends and so on, and surely he knew her. And as I told you, Todd was supposed to go on a trip to Myrtle Beach with Jacqueline, but Jacqueline didn't go with him because she found that her friend Becky was coming to her. So it wasn't right to leave her and go on a trip. And while Jacqueline was sitting with him for a while and seeing him off before he traveled, Becky was supposed to be at home alone at that time. So maybe she went out walking on the road to, for example, meet Rob. So maybe Todd, when he went to drop Jacqueline off at her house and was returning on the road, met Becky walking on the road and took her with him, and maybe he did something to her, kidnapped her, or took her with him to Myrtle Beach. The matter is a bit strange and unlikely, but that was the police's thinking at the time. So the investigators went to him and interrogated him and searched his car, but they didn't find anything from him or find that he had anything to do with the matter. Even Jacqueline called him and started begging him that if he knew anything about her, please inform her. Or even if Becky went with him on this trip to escape from her family, please tell her, and she wouldn't tell anyone. He told her that he appreciated her fear for her friend and that she was worried about her and so on, but he really didn't know anything about her, And he was also very cooperative with the investigators and with Diana, Becky's mother. Even when Becky went to his house because she was also suspicious of him, he let her search the house completely at ease, search his garage, search the house, and do whatever she wanted because he appreciated her daughter. Todd was also excluded from the list of suspects. Now Todd, Jacqueline's friend, and Rob, Becky's friend, were completely out of the circle of suspicion, so the investigators began to expand the circle of suspects a bit to find someone to suspect. They started to look now in Becky's house and her family, and the first person they suspected was her mother Diana, but she was at work at that time, and it was unlikely that she would have done anything to her. Yes, she wouldn't have accepted the pregnancy matter, but I mean, she wouldn't kill her daughter because she was pregnant. But Steve, Diana's friend, wasn't at work, so the investigators began to pay attention to the relationship between Becky and Steve, which was described as being very tense recently, and they were like enemies with each other. And Steve didn't have an alibi on the day Becky disappeared. He was supposed to be working, yes, but on that day, he took sick leave from work for the first time in his life. And also there was no one in the house with him to prove that he was indeed and didn't go to work. That's why, as I told you, Diana was working in factories and was absent for very long periods, maybe even staying out of the house overnight. Moreover, he even took sick leave the next day. God, there's something strange now. So here, the investigators began to think that on the first day, he might have done something to her and didn't manage to finish it. So on the second day, he took leave again to dispose of the body, for example, and get rid of the evidence and set his affairs in order to be completely out of the circle of suspicion. And as we said at the beginning, Steve moved to live in Diana and Becky's house when she entered adolescence, supposedly to compensate her for the disappearance of her father. So there might have been another hidden or malicious reason in his mind. That was the police's thinking, that he might have been there to get close to Becky or do something to her, and maybe the child was actually his, not Rob's. The investigators are trying to find any thread, so they're not ruling out that anything could have happened. Even until now, or rather, at first, Diana couldn't imagine or comprehend that Steve might have something to do with the matter. She was trying to find other reasons and ideas to completely remove Steve from suspicion, and all she was thinking about at that time was to look for her daughter until she found her. Even Steve was one of the people who were most looking for Becky and was very interested in finding her. He was with Diana in all her steps and went with her to search all the places, even pressuring Todd with questions to confess if he had done something to her. He was always telling the police strange information, strange theories that might have happened. The investigators saw that this matter was not ordinary. They saw that he was perhaps creating a diversion and was acting strangely towards the whole matter, to the extent that he was driving his car and going to look for her in the forests, in remote places, any hole, any grave he saw, he would go down and search in it to see if she might be buried there or not. The terrible insistence on searching for Becky made them, instead of saying, for example, that he loves her and is looking for her, wanting to find her, they turned to say that he was doing all that he was doing to distance himself from suspicion and say, yes, here I am looking for her, and I want to find her. They suspected him and he became the new suspect for them, and they put him under surveillance. But since then, he hasn't done anything suspicious, so they asked him to go to the police station to take a lie detector test. Imagine what his reaction was. He could have told them, yes, I agree, and I will come tomorrow and take the test and clear myself of suspicions and help you in the search for Becky. None of that happened. He acted very strangely, refused to undergo a lie detector test, and not just that, he went back to Diana's house, packed all his things, and fled. Diana, his lover with whom he lived for years, didn't ask about her and fled without letting her know his location or where he was going. I guess there's nothing he could do that would make him more suspect and doubtful than that. One of the things that made Diana suspect him after he fled was that when she went with him to look for Becky at Myrtle Beach, she said to him, maybe she's here, but when she saw us coming, she ran away so we wouldn't find her. He said to her, no, it's impossible for Becky to run away from me. She found that sentence a bit strange. When she thought back to what happened, she found that the sentence was strange, meaning what does it's impossible for her to run away from you mean? At that time, they drove for hours to go to Myrtle Beach to look for her, and Diana was walking like a madwoman in the streets, asking people about Becky and sticking her pictures everywhere. She even spoke with the local police there, and started going to shelters to see her and ask about her in hospitals. And when she found that there was no hope at all, she began to write with chalk on all the walls in the streets a message for Becky, saying, "Please, Becky, come back home. Please, Becky, at least call and reassure me. Your loving mother." Let's go back to Steve, who was very suspect to the investigators, and when they told him that they believed he was behind her disappearance and that he killed her, and they told him that even if you don't confess, we will discover it, he decided to stop helping in the search for Becky, packed all his things, left, and also refused to undergo a lie detector test. And here, Diana really began to suspect him after she had initially completely ruled out that he had anything to do with the matter. If you're really innocent, why run away? And why decide not to undergo a lie detector test? Is it because many innocent people have taken this test and failed it and were accused of the crime, and he's not ready to enter a test that might make them accuse him of something he didn't do? Well, sir, if you're afraid of this device, refuse, but don't run away. He fled to Ohio and thought the police wouldn't reach him, and the police didn't find him for a long time. But after months of searching and challenging to find him, they reached him and found out that he was in Ohio and put him under surveillance again. On the anniversary of Becky's disappearance, they put him under surveillance in the hope that he would do something on that day that would lead them to catch the first thread. But he didn't do anything, and his day went very normally, which made the situation of the case worse, and they lived a whole year of searching without any result. Becky's friends also organized campaigns to search for her with the help of the police and distributed posters with her picture everywhere. They began to gather all of Becky's acquaintances so that the police could interrogate them and find out from them any information that would lead them to Becky. Do they know something that might have bothered her? Do they know a place she might have gone to? There was nothing from this search that led them to anything, and they created a reward fund for any tip that would help them reach Becky. They began to make small green ribbons and distribute them to people in honor of Becky, hoping that when people wear these ribbons, they will keep the residents and the local community thinking about her and her story. On Becky's birthday, Diana still couldn't imagine that her daughter might have died and was looking for her everywhere, asking about her. She had a belief that if Becky had died or something bad had happened to her, she would have felt it, but she doesn't feel that way until now. So she's sitting and waiting for Becky to walk in on her at any moment. She also changed the message from the answering machine in case Becky called to hear it. She said in the message, "Regardless of how difficult life is, you can come back and be with me again, and I love you and won't be mad at you. Just come back to me." And from the despair she was going through, side by side with the investigators, they decided to bring in spiritual mediums to help them in the search for Becky and tell them what happened to her. Several spiritual mediums accepted, and they all agreed that Becky was dead and would never return home again. Of course, this was a very strange thing for the police. I mean, it's not usual for them to deal with spiritual mediums to help them solve the mystery of a case, but from the despair they were in, they liked the idea and said, "Let's try. We won't lose anything," especially at that time. A year and a half had passed without any answers. And indeed, they decided to deal with a spiritual medium named Noreen from Florida. They had dealt with her before in another case, and she succeeded in helping them solve the mystery of the case. So they brought her to help them find Becky. They sent her Becky's belongings and pictures by mail to use them. Becky's socks, a bracelet, pictures, and light things like that belonged to her. Noreen took these things to help her in her spiritual vision to reach Becky. They made a group call with the investigators, Diana, Becky's mother, and Noreen, the spiritual medium, and Noreen began to tell them what she was seeing. Noreen indeed began her reading and told Diana and the officers many very private things about Becky that no one knew except Diana. She began to trust in the accuracy and precision of her reading, but unfortunately, Noreen told Diana, "I'm sorry, but Becky is now dead, and she is in a place where everything around her is beautiful, meaning the environment around her is good." She told them that Becky started to draw for them the features of the place where Becky was located. She told them that she was close to the shore but not in the water, and that she was going to meet someone, and something wrong happened on the way. She said that she could now see Becky lying on the ground, and there was a fetus in her belly, and she believed that Becky was pregnant. Of course, you are now saying, "What nonsense is this?" But the world knew she was pregnant, but no, at that time, the police had not yet announced that this information was not disclosed yet. She was pregnant, the press didn't know, and nobody knew at all. There was secrecy in the investigations at that time. But now we know this information because time has passed on the case and it has been resolved. She also kept emphasizing the letter L in her speech a lot and said that this L is present in the name of the person who did this. She might be able to imagine what this person looks like and try to describe him to them. And indeed, they brought a sketch artist and tried to draw a picture of this person. The investigators took the information from the spiritual medium very seriously and began to follow this information to see where it would lead them and started looking for this person with the features and descriptions she gave them. This is besides the many messages and calls that started coming in from people, some saying they saw her in a certain place, others saying they saw her running away with a person who uses drugs, and others saying they saw her being beaten by a girl in a specific restaurant. Everyone was telling them information as they pleased, and in the end, all this information was misleading and incorrect for the police, with no basis in truth, until 2 years passed, and there was a complete halt in the case with no new information. The investigators then started to look at sexual offenders in the area and the homeless, and they investigated the teachers at her school, but still, nothing led them to her until they were informed that some bones were found in a certain place. They quickly went to that place and pulled the bones out of the hole and took them to the lab, but it turned out to be the bones of a dead dog that its owner had buried. Due to the coldness of the case and all leads reaching a dead end, they lost hope until October of the year came, and the promised day arrived. The police received information from a woman named Angela, who told them that she had information about Becky and that she knew what happened to Becky and also knew where she was located, specifically the place where she was buried. She told them that she was buried in a local farm that some teenagers used, and these teenagers would have parties and gatherings there, and the farm had a lake, and there was a tree next to the lake where they could find Becky's body buried under that tree, covered with a pile of wood. When they asked her how she knew this, she told them that her boyfriend, who told her this information, was the one who killed Becky Stowe after he found out she was pregnant and refused the idea of abortion. And of course, I don't need to tell you who her boyfriend was. You surely figured it out yourselves. Her boyfriend was Robert Eugene Brum, nicknamed Lem. The investigators initially didn't believe her because they had received a lot of information like this recently, and all of it was wrong. Although their hope wasn't big at that moment, they said, "Let's try. We won't lose anything." They called her and conducted a quick interrogation with her, and she told them that Becky and Rob knew each other and were very close during the period she was away from Rob. So when she returned to him again, and once she asked him, "Do you know what happened to Becky? I know you were very close to her and dating her. Maybe you know what happened to her." He said to her, "Yes, I know what happened to her because I'm the one who killed her with my hands and buried her in one of the family farms." How can someone have a conversation like this and say such things and continue their day normally? And stranger still, how can someone hear this and continue their day normally? And Angela continued with Rob and didn't report him to the police. Angela later told her family about this, and her family didn't allow her to keep this secret and pressured her until she reported it to the police. So to reassure them a bit, they brought her in and conducted a lie detector test to see if what she was saying was true or false, and indeed her words were true. But the details were confusing or not sufficient for them, meaning they didn't give them enough information they needed. But she told them, "You can verify my words and go to the farm next to the lake under the tree. You'll find her remains in a grave there." The investigators, when they asked her, "Why did he tell you this? Wasn't he afraid of you, for example?" She said that she believed he told her this to bring them closer together, so there wouldn't be any secrets. And when they asked her, "Why didn't you tell us earlier about this?" she told them that the matter didn't concern her at all, and as far as she and Rob were together, that was it. She considered Becky like trash, and she was finally rid of her. So why report it to the police? Indeed, they searched the farm and found out that the farm belonged to his cousin or his cousin's father, which means his uncle. They knew that he and his cousin always had parties at the farm, inviting their friends and having gatherings there, drinking, getting drunk, and staying up late, all on her grave. The police couldn't imagine how a child of 16 years could do all this, and also make the police think that he wasn't involved in the matter. A child of 16 years deceived them and even passed a lie detector test and succeeded in it. In the end, Angela told the police that she loved Rob and was attached to him, but over time he started beating her and humiliating her, and she was afraid to tell the police about his matter. With her family's pressure on her, She finally confessed to the police, and in the end, she ended up as a witness in the prosecution and was not accused of anything. The strange thing about the matter is that Rob not only told Angela that he killed Becky, but when they were having parties at the farm and gatherings and such, drinking and getting drunk, he would boast that he killed Becky and tell his friends so. But they thought he was joking and that he was drunk. The investigators decided not to take any action before they went to the farm to dig and verify Angela's words for themselves. They went to the farm at the exact location Angela described, brought the excavators, and started digging until they smelled a foul odor starting to emerge. With a new hit from the excavator, a piece of red fabric appeared in front of them, which they believed was from Becky's clothes. They stopped digging with the excavator and started digging by hand gently, so if she was really there, they wouldn't spoil any evidence until they actually found her body, and she was in a bad state, of course. Diana entered a state of shock and collapse, as did her sister Sandy, and even her friend Jacqueline entered a state of shock. But she was happy, not happy about her death, but happy that she knew her fate and was reassured that at least they found her remains and could bury her in a good place. The remains were transferred to the lab, and because the decomposition was severe, meaning bone in front of bone, the forensic doctor couldn't determine the cause of death or even determine if she was pregnant or not. But all they could confirm was that these were indeed Becky's remains. Of course, at that time, the investigators really wanted to talk to Rob and bring him in for interrogation and find out what happened. After the news spread and Rob found out that they went to the farm and dug up the remains, he went by himself to the police station and told them, "I'm coming to tell you exactly what happened," and confessed to them what he did to Becky. He told them that at that time, he was going through a period of psychological pressure because of school and because of her pregnancy, and she didn't want to abort the child. When he found out that she was pregnant and asked her to abort it, and she said no, they got into an argument, and she asked to meet him. So he went to her with his car at Jacqueline's house to go out and talk outside quietly. Of course, at that time, Jacqueline was out with her boyfriend Todd, so she didn't know what happened to her and didn't know that he took her from the house and left. They say that he took her and went to the family farm, a quiet place where they could talk comfortably, and they went to the farm, sat in front of the lake, and started talking. Some time passed, and he says that he was joking with her and hit her like that and said to her, "I don't know what I'm going to do to you." And she returned the hit, and he returned the hit, and it turned into a struggle, grabbing each other, and they kept rolling over each other on the ground until he says he heard a sound of something cracking and heard the sound of her hitting a stone on the ground, and supposedly, that meant she was dead. And of course, he didn't mean to do that to her. He was asked, "If your story is really true, why would you dig a hole in that place on the farm the day before? You and your cousin discovered that you dug the hole where you placed her body the day before, you and your cousin, and you convinced him at that time to dig this hole for a completely different reason and didn't tell the real reason. What happened was that Rob and his cousin were digging this hole, and Rob told him that he was digging this hole so that when he hunted, he would bury the animal he caught in it. His cousin Gary knew that he indeed hunted animals and got rid of them by burying them. So for him, the matter was normal, meaning digging the hole. This confirms that he got rid of her with premeditation and malice aforethought. His friend Gary was the one who told the investigators about the hole and told them that for him, the matter was normal because he knew that Rob hunted and buried the animal he caught so that his uncle wouldn't see it and wouldn't scold him. The investigators also said that after they finished digging, he told him that's enough. This hole will suffice and will be very good for the whore. Gary said at that time that he didn't pay attention to the words. He thought he was joking and talking about the body of the animal he would catch. It never crossed his mind at all that Rob could do something like this. Then Gary told him that he would go to the farm the next day with his family, so he told him not to worry about the hole. "I hunted and buried the prey in it and covered it up already." After the news spread and Rob confessed to killing Becky, her family and friends were not shocked at all because they knew from the beginning that he was the one who did this to her, especially Jacqueline, who said she knew from the first day since Rob called her and asked about Becky, and she hung up on him, knowing that he did this to her or did something to her and was hiding it from them. She said, "I know that the damned one knows where she is and did something to her." It was also said that the last time Becky and Rob met was at the house. Honestly, it's not clear, or I don't know if it was Jacqueline's house or her mother's house. The important thing is that in this meeting, they were talking about the pregnancy and abortion issue, and he was telling her that she must abort this child, and she didn't agree, so it was a very heated and tense discussion between them. He left her and walked away, got in his car, and left. As he was leaving, he was screaming and saying to her, "You're the one who destroyed my life. You're the one who did this to me." So it's clear that he had a violent and strong reaction to the pregnancy issue and had to get rid of it so as not to tarnish his image. Becky's friends indeed suspected him since then and always asked him about Becky whenever they saw him, whether at school, on the street, at his house, anywhere, accusing him of being the reason for her disappearance, to the point that he called the investigators and asked them to tell Becky's friends to stop bothering him and not to approach him again. Indeed, the investigators talked to them and ordered them to stop bothering him or approaching him and not to bring up the subject again. They even went as far as to bother Angela, Rob's girlfriend, when she returned from New York, always following her, whether at school or meeting her on the street, asking her about what he did, and she always told them that he was a good person and didn't do anything to her. Even Becky's father was convinced that Rob was behind the matter and knew the whole story and always went to the investigators and told them so, but they didn't believe her and always defended him until one of the investigators argued with her and kept yelling at her, telling her that Rob was innocent and that she should stop bringing up the subject again. The important thing is that after 3 days from Angela's call to the police and her confession to everything, Robert Lem was officially arrested on charges of murder. They will present him to the court, and the court will decide whether it was premeditated murder of the first degree or the second degree. There was something they were puzzled about, and a question always raised was whether he would be tried as an adult or a minor because he was 16 only years old at the time of committing the crime. But now after his arrest, he was already an adult. But they decided to try him considering the heinousness of the crime, and the trial began. Her family and friends had to travel and stay in that city to attend the trial sessions. The prosecution presented its theory in the hearing session and said that Rob met with Becky to discuss the pregnancy issue, and instead of taking her to the lake on the basis that it was a quiet place where they could talk comfortably, he took her and showed her the hole he had dug, as if he was telling her, "Either you abort this baby and get rid of it, or your fate is this hole." The prosecution also said that in the end, Rob preferred to get rid of her rather than deal with the embarrassment she might cause him. The district attorney also said that they started arguing, and Becky defended herself, but Rob strangled her, and at some point, when she lost consciousness, he carried her and put her in the hole, whether she was dead or unconscious, and he buried her in the hole while she was still alive, and that was the opinion of the forensic doctor. There were also 2 theories, meaning one of the forensic doctors said that the first theory is that he believes that Becky died and then Rob stripped her, put her in the hole, buried her, and covered her up. Another forensic doctor said that he believes that she was still alive and just unconscious, and Rob put her in the hole, buried her, and covered her up. There is no confirmed theory in them because, of course, the remains were in a very bad condition, but in both cases, he got rid of her by killing her, putting her in the hole, and covering her up. The investigators also discovered a loophole in Rob's alibi and found out that his colleague at work covered for him at work and forged his signature on the day he was executing the crime, on the basis that he went to work, but he didn't go, and he had agreed with his colleague to forge his signature. They also said the intelligence of Rob that he decided to get rid of Becky by strangulation, not using a knife, for example, or a gun. So there wouldn't be blood, and so he wouldn't leave behind a weapon for the crime that could be evidence against him later. They also said that after he finished burying her, he took the shovel he used in the burial, put it in the trunk of his car, drove his car, went home, showered, changed his clothes, and acted as if nothing had happened. He went to his mother's work, visited her, talked to her for a while, and then went to his job. On his way to his job, he threw the shovel on the road somewhere, and then he called Jacqueline and asked her where Becky was, on the basis that he didn't know anything about her and that he was an innocent person calling in good faith. His defense tried to clear him in any way and said that he was suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder because he was exposed to many humiliations at his school from a teacher who dealt with many students in a not-so-good way, and he was very affected by this teacher's way. His defense rambled a bit on this subject, but the jury was not convinced by this talk and rejected his petition. In the end, the prosecution told the jury either to convict him of first-degree murder or at least second-degree murder, or if you believe his story, to release him, hoping it wouldn't be that easy. After 5 hours of discussion, Robert Lem was convicted of first-degree murder with premeditation and sentenced to mandatory life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Of course, Becky's mother, her sister Sandy, and all her friends were happy with this verdict, and finally, justice was served, and the criminal got his punishment. After the session, Rob's family released a statement saying that both sides lost in this case and that there was no winning or losing side, and they were very sympathetic to Becky's family and supported them, but they also supported their son because they felt they were the reason for what he had reached, and they felt that what he was in was because of an incident that happened a long time ago with his sister, who was also pregnant before marriage, and his family had a very bad reaction to the matter. He was afraid that the matter would be repeated with him, so he preferred to get rid of Becky rather than deal with the embarrassment she would cause him. But in the end, they had nothing to do with the matter. He thought, planned, and executed everything professionally to the extent that he was able to deceive the police for 2 full years and did everything of his own free will. Diana filed a lawsuit against Rob because he started boasting that he was writing a book about the story of Becky's murder and that he would sell it and profit from it, and here she actually won the case. She was awarded $2.5 million in compensation. This figure is indeed real, and I have verified it. I'm not sure how he will pay this amount, and I don't understand why they would impose such a large sum on him because in the end, he wrote the book, yes, but he didn't print it, didn't sell it, didn't distribute it, so there are no profits. What's the point of such a large amount? Surely he won't be able to pay it. The important thing is that, of course, Rob won't stay silent about this. Neither will his defense team, and they filed an appeal against the verdict. This news hit Sandy like a thunderbolt, and she was very upset that Rob might get out of prison. She started attending the appeal sessions, hoping that it wouldn't happen. In the appeal session, Rob took the stand and said that he was ashamed of himself, felt disgusted with himself, and was remorseful, and all that stuff. Of course, he wasn't doing this for God or the country. He was just acting so that the jury would sympathize with him and reduce his sentence. His defense kept saying that Rob was a good person during the years he spent in prison and that he tried as much as he could to maintain a good environment in the prison community he lived in, preventing several inmates from committing suicide or harming themselves. Of course, Rob's defense, as you understood, was beating the drum for him in front of the jury just to please them and get a reduced sentence. Becky's mother died in the year at the age of 65 after a long battle with cancer. At that time, Sandy thanked God that her mother died before knowing about the appeal and that Rob was trying to get out of prison, and who knows if he would actually get out. So she was somewhat relieved that her mother died before that day came. In the end, the judge decided to reduce Rob's sentence from life in prison to just 30 years, and the time he had already spent in prison would be counted towards the years. Rob was supposed to serve years and 3 months in prison, so he had less than a year left and would be released. Indeed, he applied for parole in January, the request was accepted, and he was released and placed under supervision starting from January. His supervision was supposed to end in January, which was last month. Rob is now considered to be 48 years old or entering his 50s or something, so he still has a long time to live and will surely enjoy his coming life. And all this while Becky's family is outside, sad about their daughter, and Sandy is sad about her sister, and she saw the criminal out again and living his life. Write to me now, what do you think about this verdict? Did he deserve a harsher sentence? Or was this sentence enough for him, considering his age at the time of committing the crime and that he didn't understand what he was doing? Write to me your opinion on the case in general. The case may be long too, but I think its details are a bit easier than the previous cases and understandable. And that's it. We have reached the end of the video today. Don't forget to like the video, guys. Please like the video so it can spread. Make some moves and tricks. And if you're not yet subscribed to the channel, please subscribe and activate the notification bell on the all option. Let the story box fill up, and then we'll meet.